Hello everybody and welcome to this video entitled The 10 Best Stocks in My Portfolio. These are the stocks that if I could only buy 10 stocks, I would buy these 10 stocks, knowing that I put Microstrategy here in Bitcoin. It's technically not a stock, but it's my second largest asset in a way, right? My second largest stock is actually Enphase. So anyways, you have a rank, and really, when I put all of them at 5, for example, it means they're roughly the same position, roughly. A rank gives you a rough idea of a percentage in the portfolio. And if you've already seen the series, this is likely all you need to see, which is the updated valuation. Although typically I go for each stock and give quick updates and quick thoughts on each stock, so you're free to watch it again if you wish to. One thing that I have to say about this week is that we are seeing kind of a mini decline. I mean, it's the August slump, as I like to call it. Stocks almost always go down in August, and we're halfway through August. We have another 2 weeks, so let's not. I mean, let's keep hope, but still, we it may go down a little more. We'll see. But right now we have some stocks that I've gotten cheap again, namely Tesla. Tesla got cheap again. In my view, it's slightly above my average of all of the stocks that I cover. Of course, the stocks that I consider the best stocks are typically even cheaper, because I have HIMS in there and I have StoneCo in there. StoneCo reported amazing earnings yesterday. Nubank is very, very cheap as well. And we have some more expensive stock, like Palantir, for example, is still benefiting from what I call the AI hype. I mean, it's real hype. AI is actually real, but it's also why it's trading at a much higher valuation. And briefly, the type of valuation that I use on this channel to assess growth stocks is enterprise value over gross profit over revenue growth, and I use that because it's my take on the PEG ratio of Peter Lynch. Peter Lynch uses the PEG ratio for companies that are optimized for earnings. None of my companies are optimized for earnings. All of my companies are optimized for hyper growth. And this gets to the part of the video that you may have already seen, so feel free to skip this part. So let me get started. If you're new to the channel, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to explain what I do on this channel. So if you're new to the channel, I invest in hypergrowth stocks. Why do I do that? Because I think that I don't have a choice. I think that investing in the NASDAQ, the NASDAQ has returned 15% a year, for the past 20, 30 years. I don't know how long, but it's returned 15% a year for a long time. If I were to just buy the NASDAQ, that would be a 15% nominal return. In my view, 15% nominal return is a 0% real return, because even though the Fed is bluffing and keeps telling us we may raise interest rates, we saw that yesterday in the minutes, we know it's a bluff. It's not possible. What's going to happen is the U.S. government is going to have a $2 trillion deficit next year in no time, and there will be no bidders on these treasuries. The Fed will have to buy those treasuries and resume quantitative easing. I am more certain about this than just about everything. Not Fed advice, not investment advice, not monetary policy advice, but QE will resume. And when QE resumes, that means that the supposedly low expansion in money supply that we've had over the past 2 years, that expansion in money supply will resume again. And will we get another year with 30% money supply increase, like we had during the events of 2020? Are we going to get that, right? I think so. And so that's why I want at least 15% return in order to say that I have made no return. That's what I require. And that's why I invest in hypergrowth stocks. Because to me, if a stock is not gaining more than 15% extra revenue each year, that stock is drowning. That stock is drowning. And typically that means you're going to have to invest in tech. You're going to have to invest in innovation. And I don't have a choice. I love PepsiCo, I love Costco as much as the next guy. These are fine companies, but they're not going to give the return that beat monetary inflation. Only hyper growth stocks, in my view, are going to beat monetary inflation. And uncorrelated assets like Bitcoin, like single family homes in good locations, those could also beat monetary inflation. But if you have a stock, which is an asset that is correlated to the US dollar, a stock is a US dollar derivative, that stock needs to take in 15% more dollars each year just to stay afloat, which means that if you want a decent return, and a decent return is a 15% real return, you need actually a 30% nominal return. And these stocks, I believe, have a potential to do that. No investment advice, of course. And my style of investing in a nutshell: I look at sales. I'm a big sales advocate. To me, sales revenue, right, is the same thing. To me, sales are a proxy for adoption. They don't lie. They don't like earnings. It's easy to lie on earnings. You can do various adjustments, use various accounting accruals to make. You can do buybacks, right? Earnings can be manipulated. You can't manipulate sales, which is why I trust sales a lot. Sales to me are a proxy for adoption, and all of these stocks that I look at have tremendous sales growth. And in a nutshell, my style of investing, what is it? Well, it is the product or the service adoption curve. This is sometimes referred to as the S-curve of product adoption. And what happens is that it's a pattern that you see for just about every single innovation. Once an innovation starts passing the threshold of 5%-ish adoption, you typically have an exponential rise in the adoption of that product. And so that's why, for example, Tesla is at about 4% of electric cars sold in the US. Electric cars as a whole are about 6%. To me, that means that electric cars are going to take over. They're going to take off, and we're about to experience, 8 to 12 years of a tremendous takeoff of electric cars versus ICE cars, right? Internal combustion engine. And if you look at history, the same happened when the gas car came and the horses went away, right? I mean, most of the horses disappeared in less than 10 years. That's the same story. That's the story of product adoption, and I use sales as a proxy to tell me that a product is getting adopted. So let me get started with the best stocks in each of these mega trends, because I tried to select one stock per mega trend. Okay, so the first mega trend that I'm investing in is the energy revolution. In the energy revolution, we begin with Tesla. So why am I investing in Tesla? Tesla is revolutionizing electric cars, period. Cars, period, sorry, not just electric cars. Why would anybody want to invest in Tesla? Because Teslas are 10 times better, and they're 10 times better than the alternative, which is ICE cars, but that is itself an understatement. I.e., Tesla is S-curves on top of S-curves on top of S-curves. For example, they're 10 times cheaper to fuel. They have 10 times fewer parts. You don't need to go to the gas stations. They eventually drive themselves. They have the biggest HEPA filter you could hope for. They filter the air inside the cabin and outside the cabin. Very, very few welded parts, right? More and more Teslas have single block, larger parts, which makes the car more durable. Very little maintenance, right? What else can you say about Teslas? They are an addition of S-curves on top of S-curves on top of S-curves, right? The latest Teslas have gaming consoles that are just as good as any video game, right? So how to make a car better? The whole idea of this company is to cram as much 10x things as you can inside the vehicle, inside the car, and this touches every single aspect of the car, like even down to say. The lever, like this is something that people don't think about, but for a lot of Gen Z, for a lot of millennials, having faux lever or fake lever is actually an upsell and something that is much better than having a real lever. Well, guess what? Teslas only come with faux lever, right? That's just an example of what they do. Oh, room, how much room you have in the car. There's way more room in a Tesla than in a regular car because, of course, you have a front trunk and a back trunk. So really, it is a step change in technology. Those electric cars in general, and the leading electric car is Tesla. And we look at these returns, and we look at the past returns that I often take for Tesla. This is the past returns that Tesla have done for the past 10 years roughly. And if you look at the past 10 years roughly, you are at a 53% nominal return, right? In dollars, you're showing a 53% return. That means that the real return, because I like to remove my 15% monetary inflation, so the real return is 38%. And a lot of people say, well, there's no room for this company to do a 10x from here. But I was looking at Apple, and Apple is about a 50% market share for the iPhone, and Apple is the iPhone company, right? That's how it should be named. Really, it's an old joke on the internet that it's the iPhone company, but it is the iPhone company. They have close to $400 billion in sales now that they are mature. So 15 years after the iPhone was launched, they have $400 billion in sales. Tesla doesn't even have $100 billion in sales, and they sell cars. So imagine this: is it possible to imagine a company like Tesla with $1 trillion in sales? And in my mind, there is no doubt that this is possible. $1 trillion in sales is not far-fetched when you have iPhones that have close to $400 billion in sales. And so if you have $1 trillion in sales, it doesn't take that high of a price-to-sales ratio for you to get to a 5 trillion company or a 6 or 7 trillion company. Remember, we're selling cars here. Cars are much, 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 much more expensive than all of the iPhone electronics or all of the Apple electronics one could buy. And actually, when you map out the numbers over the next 10 years for how big Tesla could be, it is mind-boggling, and it is in the trillions, because cars are the second biggest expense that an household makes. I mean, arguably tied with healthcare. Arguably, an household is going to spend as much money on cars as they are on healthcare. Arguably, right? Number one is housing. So you're really, really. I mean, the fact that Tesla is revolutionizing this, to me, is stunning. And then you also have the other aspect of Tesla, which is that it's just much more of an electric car company. For example, they are leading in AI, right? We learned the other day that they're launching their own data centers now. They are leading in a machine learning, right? AI, but not only, right? Electric. They're a leader in batteries, in battery scale. That's why they're launching the Powerwalls. They're launching the Megapacks. They are also, just like Standard Oil back in the day. I mean, are they going to be the main quote-unquote electric gas station in the future, right? Is this going to be a network of Tesla chargers that replaces gas stations? Because even though 95% of the time most people are going to charge their cars at home, when they're on road trips, they're likely going to use a Tesla charger. And that's Tesla that's going to make money on that too. So this is a company that's shaping up to becoming absolutely huge. It is the number one position in my portfolio. I do not cover it much on the channel because every single over YouTuber out there just covers Tesla. But to me, I mean. So these are my 10 best stocks, right? So this is if I could only buy 10 stocks. Well, if I were to do if I could only buy one stock video, that stock would be Tesla, and that asset would be Tesla. Actually, it would be ahead of Bitcoin, because I consider Bitcoin, I mean, ever so slightly, but just a tad more risky than Tesla, because. Just a tad, but I mean, I'm very confident in both, because Bitcoin is my second position. But still, so that's Tesla for you. Okay, so I'm done with Tesla. The second one is Enphase. So still in the energy revolution theme. So why is Enphase number 2? Well, if you look at Enphase, so what does Enphase do? They are the system underlying many solar installations in the US and in Europe. They're growing very, very fast. What they do is they manufacture microinverters. So microinverters are those tiny electronic boxes that you put below each solar panel, and it is a major change in technology compared to the old tech, which is a big, bulky string inverter in the garage. And that's what SolarEdge sells. And for residential installs of solar, you have Enphase and SolarEdge. They're essentially a duopoly. Enphase, I believe, has the technically superior solution because they rely on microinverters. And microinverters, they just, in my view, they just make a lot more sense. They are safer because you don't need to have a string of 10 solar panels in DC, 600 volts, 5,000 watts going through your roof. You don't need to have any of that with an AC coupled system where the energy is taken from each solar panel and turned into AC. A lot of electricians understand AC much better when they understand DC. There's also the issue of shutoffs. So if you follow this industry, you know that a lot of cities, firefighters, local authorities require shutoffs at the panel level in case of a fire. And the problem is with string inverters, right, you had no shutoff. So if there was a fire during the day, you would have firefighters who were at risk because they would intervene on a house that has, strings of 5,000 watts DC running for it. And keep in mind, 5,000 watts, that's what, three dryers or 3 washing machines running at the same time worth of energy. That's a lot of energy, right? There's no coming back from that if there's an issue. And of course, SolarEdge has come up with optimizers, which is a solution where you put a little box under a panel in order to be able to switch off the energy from your panels. But to me, that's a patch. To me, that system is a patch, because if you're going to put a box under a panel and you put a giant, big, bulky box in the garage, you're doing the steps twice, right? Why not put a tiny box called a microinverter under a panel and not put a big, bulky, heavy string inverter in the garage? That's so much more logical. That's why I believe they have a superior solution. And keep in mind that these systems that you install, they very, very commonly, especially as we get into the battery world, they very, very commonly exceed 100 kilos, 200 pounds. Some system, I was looking at batteries, home batteries the other day. Some home batteries are actually 400 pounds. 400 pounds. So imagine an installer that does this all day, who has to lift, and they probably have other people helping them, but even if you're 3 people lifting 400 pounds, 200 kilos, that's crazy, right? That's a lot. And so think about the advantage of an Enphase system, which is consumer electronics, not appliance, and which really, really speeds up and eases the install. Really quickly and fundamentally, why residential solar? Why do I believe in that? Because homes have enough space on their roofs to power between 6 and 9 times their needs. And because of that, I believe that every single home, when you drive around a neighborhood 10 years from now, they will all have solar, because solar just makes that much sense. It makes even more sense as people get electric cars. It makes even more sense as electric utility prices rise. It makes even more sense as people slowly switch to heat pumps for heating their homes in the winter. So anyways, just a convergence of technologies, and that's why I invest in solar. And to me, we've just reached the beginning of that adoption. People are just starting to see the benefits. Adoption of solar in the U.S. is about 4%. About 4% of residential homes in the U.S. have solar on them. In the EU, it's higher at 10%. So we're right at the beginning of that S-curve. And I believe Enphase has the best solution in this sector, and it is my number one pick in this sector. All right. So what is the third stock? And I'll go to Bitcoin at the very end. So the third stock that I have in this spreadsheet is HIMSS. So why do I invest in HIMSS? Well, healthcare is getting disrupted. And the question is, who's going to disrupt healthcare? Is it going to be Teladoc? or is it going to be HIMSS? And I believe it's going to be HIMSS. I'm on team HIMSS on this one. And why do I believe in HIMSS? Because HIMSS is seeing very, very strong adoption of its products outside of healthcare system. HIMSS is both a doctor and a pharmacist in your pocket. I believe this is the future of healthcare because and actually, if you listen to the latest call of HIMSS, which I did, they go as high as 80%. The CEO explains 70 to 80% of procedures do not need physical consultation, right? They do not need a physical space. You can do the entire consultation with a doctor on your phone without a physical space. And so, a lot of the competition of HIMSS, they're entrenched with their facilities, right? They have all of this space. They have to justify owning all of these medical office buildings. And so, of course, they're pushing for the return in the office. But the truth is, today, with phones, with technology, between 70 and 80% of a doctor consultations you can do on your phone. And this is going to be even more true as people get Apple Watches and other smartwatches, and you get an ECG, and you get all sorts of different diagnoses at home. This is going to be even more true as we go. And I believe HIMSS has the better solution because if all of a sudden you don't have crazy expensive hospitals and facilities and medical office buildings to pay for, if all of a sudden you don't need to have a doctor that is located in your town, and if you remove the physicality, of course, of the business, and you have a doctor consult with someone who just works from home, a doctor who just works from home, imagine the scale that you're getting. You're getting a doctor that can do many, many, many more consultations than they could otherwise have done in a physical space, right? They don't have to drive there. They don't have to do any of that. Then the doctor consult itself is AI enhanced, right? And HIMSS has a tremendous amount of AI going in their app. They do personalized medicine, right? They're trying to give you a custom medicine depending on what you may need or may not need. If you don't need a medicine, they'll give you advice. HIMSS has a lot going for it, and it is the disruption of physical healthcare. Healthcare doesn't have to be this expensive, and actually, healthcare, in my view, is going to get much, 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 much cheaper. And this is why HIMSS operates entirely outside of the insurance business. HIMSS doesn't take insurance because there is no need for insurance in healthcare 2.0. There's no need for insurance because it's much cheaper. You have an app, so as opposed to having tremendous medical buildings and medical facilities and doctors. No, you do it through an app, and doctors are enhanced through AI through the app. So that's much cheaper. And then HIMSS has come up with the bundling of the pharmacy and the doctor together, which makes a lot of sense. Because if you look at healthcare is very siloed. Like, let's take a very simple example of, say you need a dermatology treatment, because I don't want to use ED all the time to talk about HIMSS. So let's say you use a dermatology treatment. In the regular healthcare system, regular health insurance, well, first of all, you have to find a primary doctor. But let's say you're in your late 20s, early 30s. Who has a primary doctor in their late 20s? Very few people. So that's a 3 to 4 months process to get a primary doctor. Then you have to get a referral to a specialist. That add another 2 to 3 months. And then once you have that, it's your first time going to the pharmacy. You have to figure out how pharmacies work. Doctors are like, send your prescription where? Oh, send it to this pharmacy, that pharmacy. Then you have to go to a third party, right? So it's a siloed experience. And then it is so siloed. So you have the primary doctor, then you have the specialist, then you have the pharmacy, and then you have the insurance. And the insurance may send you a bill 2 months later because they realize that what they thought was covered is actually not covered. Or vice versa, right? They may send you money back because they realize, you paid too much. It's a complete mess. It's a siloed mess. It makes much more sense, and this is kind of part of the Amazon proposition too. The whole idea of healthcare, buy it now, right? You get the app, You click a button, you wait 24 to 48 hours, you have a specialist, you talk to a specialist, the specialist diagnoses your problem on the phone, and then prescribes you a medication which arrives through the mail, through a fully automated pharmacy. Hims has 2 highly automated pharmacies, and they just ship the product to you. And you solve the problem of pharmacies, right? CVS has 9,000 pharmacies. Walgreens probably has just as much. There's probably 20,000 plus pharmacies in the United States. Do we need 20,000 plus pharmacies in the era of gigantism, in the era of giant warehouses, and in the era of one-day shipping? Do we need that? And no, we don't. No, we don't. So that's the reason why I invest in Hims. I think it's the most holistic play in the healthcare space, and it is my bet that they will be a key disruptor of healthcare. Let me now move on to Palantir. So why Palantir? Why do I invest in Palantir? And I've actually criticized Palantir a few times on this channel. If you follow the channel for a while, I've criticized them on their growth rate. The growth has stalled to about 20% now, and I am still using in the way I analyze the stock, because this is a long-term thing, right? So I'm still using for the next 7 years a 30% growth rate, because that's what the CEO Alex Karp famously guided. So I'm gonna hold him accountable to that 30% growth rate. But right now there's been a slowdown, right? The software is selling, but it is not selling as fast as many of the early investors in Palantir had hoped. But to me, nonetheless, that is not that big of a problem, this slowdown, because actually if you look under the hood of this business, this is still mostly a military business. And the military business is doing extremely, extremely, extremely well for Palantir. In fact, when you do a breakdown, Gotham, their military software, grows a tad faster than Foundry, their commercial software. And my bet on Palantir as the leader of big data is that they will become a 4th military contractor of the United States. And so if you are the 4th military contractor in the United States, you're going to have a market cap that's going to be a few hundreds of billions of dollars. Because think about how much money is spent on defense by the West, right? Altogether, it's well over $1 trillion altogether. Granted, the bulk of that is spent by the US, but altogether it's well over $1 trillion. Think about that as your pool, as the market size, right? So there's a tremendous amount of market to be grabbed, and they only grab about $2 billion. So they only grab $2 billion a year out of this $1 trillion plus market that is the military spending. And also, and I'll finish with that, the founder of Palantir is Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is part of the PayPal mafia. The PayPal mafia are people who have put forward, the whole 10x philosophy, the whole 0 to 1 philosophy. Your product needs to be a 10x improvement. If your product is a 10x improvement, people have no choice but to switch to your product, because your product is so strong that it makes all competition irrelevant. I always keep that in mind when I invest in Palantir, even though it's the most expensive stock out of all of the 10 stocks right now. In the way I value stock, is the most expensive. I still believe Palantir has a tremendous future as a military contractor, and you get the option on their commercial product. It's a free option that you get. So let me then move on to Crowdstrike. So Crowdstrike is a cybersecurity play. Cybersecurity, I believe, is the next phase of security, right? So if you look at back in the day, businesses back in the day, they needed to have security at the mall, security at the office, physical security. But today we live in a digital world. Most of us actually live in cyberspace, right? If you spend more than 6 hours a day on a computer, you live in cyberspace. And therefore, what becomes more important to you is cyber security, electronic security, and that's what Crowdstrike does. Crowdstrike gave us impressive guidance of a 3 years out IRR guidance, and that actually breaks down to 39% each year over the next 3 years if you take their long-term guidance of $5 billion in ARR. What does Crowdstrike do in a nutshell, and why do I pick Crowdstrike as my pick here compared to other stocks, is they are a cloud-based cybersecurity company, and I call it an antivirus. But it's actually an endpoint security system. So it's something you install on your phone, you install on your laptop, any device that's going to be on the edge of the network. And whenever there is a breach on any of these devices, CrowdStrike catches it and broadcasts it to the rest of the network. So you have tremendous network effects in that whenever, and imagine in the future if they have 1 billion endpoints, whenever one endpoint gets breached by the virus, all of the other systems get updated and get an update. And then that virus can only attack one endpoint, right? Only one laptop can get impacted by this virus because the rest of the network has been updated. And that's the concept of network or cloud cyber security. Very powerful, and of course this company was the first one in this space, the early player in this space, which means that it's likely to win in my view, and so I'm very happy to own CrowdStrike. Let me move on to e-commerce. E-commerce is my most advanced megatrend out of all of these megatrends. But e-commerce has had outstanding return. You can see MercadoLibre, 27% a year over 13 years, right? But if you go before the drop, before it crashed, it had a 35% ARR actually over 13 years, right before that crash. So to me that company is of course betting on the adoption of e-commerce. In the West, we're pretty used to e-commerce. It's very, very mainstream now. In the West, we're probably close to halfway to the adoption of e-commerce. Not exactly the case in Latin America. Latin America is still a little more nascent. And therefore, you're getting that product adoption curve a little earlier, in my view, when someone invests in MercadoLibre. MercadoLibre is an outstanding company. They have succeeded in Brazil, where many have failed in Brazil, like C Limited, for example. Even Brazilian companies have failed in Brazil, like Americanas, their main competitor, went bankrupt. So I believe in this company very much. I think it's a well-managed company, and it's a bet on the e-commerce megatrend. Let's talk about StoneCo. So StoneCo just reported earnings yesterday. Let me remove this. This is bothering me here. StoneCo just reported earnings yesterday. Their growth is accelerating. That's why I updated it to 40%. We'll see that 52% annualized rate, which is what they're going at right now, holds. If you take their quarterly growth rate on the quarter they posted yesterday, the annualized growth rate on StoneCo is actually 52%, which is absolutely amazing, right? I still view StoneCo as buying Square in 2014. They have small businesses in Brazil that are heavily adopting these new payment systems, and it's still getting adopted. StoneCo allows you to accept credit cards and debit cards, and the new central bank in Brazil, the Pix payment system, which is the equivalent of our Fed now, it allows you to adopt that, and so StoneCo is kind of part of this end of cash or war on cash era, where people and payments are going fully digital. And the business, of course, is you have a take rate, right? Take rate on the transaction volume. So the StoneCo take rate is almost 2.5% is their take rate on the transaction volume. And so more people are adopting the payment terminals of StoneCo, more companies, more small businesses. Those small businesses are using those terminal payments more. That's what we learned in the report yesterday. And more people are using digital forms of payments in Brazil, and fewer people are using cash. So that's the third big trend. And then the fourth trend for this stock, in my view, is the fact that Brazil is dropping interest rates right now. And so when you drop interest rates, the velocity of the money increases. Money changes hands more often. And so Brazil might be entering the economic recovery much sooner than the US, thanks to their central bank. And therefore, there's four factors. And these four factors, I think, really play well into the adoption of the product. Their main competitor is PagSecuro. To me, they're in a quasi duopoly. I think PagSecuro and StoneCo will both win. I just prefer StoneCo because StoneCo is the slightly younger company, and it is also a slightly, I think, more with the trends type of company. Like if you look at their sponsorship of Big Brother Brazil, if you look at their marketing, I think the marketing resonates more with the consumer of the future than PagSecuro. But I may entirely be wrong because I don't live in Brazil. But to me, PagSecuro and StoneCo, they'll be the same, kind of the same story as Enphase with SolarEdge. It's like, are they both gonna win? It's likely they'll both win. But it's not like Tesla. Like Tesla, for example, doesn't have a competitor. Tesla doesn't have a match. Tesla is the only game in town. Not true for payments, not necessarily true for solar. So important to keep that in mind. Let me now move on to Nubank. So Nubank, again, they reported earnings, absolutely outstanding earnings. Nubank is a neobank in Latin America. Brazil is their biggest market right now. They're going after Mexico. Mexico is one of their markets where they hope to have a lot of growth. What is a neobank, right? A neobank is a bank that competes against traditional banks who have branches, and branches hold them back. So neobanks oftentimes are able to offer the better products, those 10x products, those products that make the competition irrelevant, can only be offered by a neobank because a neobank doesn't have the infrastructure that a traditional legacy bank has. Now, as far as Latin America goes, you have not only neobanks not only compete against legacy banks and take customers away from legacy banks, and that's one factor. Another big factor is that they create a lot of induced demand, a lot of new a lot of new customers in banking. A lot of new customers in banking come to Nubank and they go straight from cash to having a bank, from holding their household, everything in cash, to having a bank. So not only does a neobank like Nubank compete against legacy banks by offering better products, but they also are people's first relationship with a financial institution. And so that's why you end up with a company like Nubank, which is very, very, very loved. Like they have a very high net promoter score, something very uncanny for a bank. And you find that you can make similar arguments for SoFi here, by the way. Still, if I were to make a pick, I still prefer Nubank over SoFi because I think the growth of a neobank in Latin America is almost unabated because you have a lot of customers that don't have banks. The customer acquisition cost is dirt cheap. I mean, it's essentially word of mouth, right? It's not like SoFi, who has to compete against legacy banks who do their best to try to retain their customers. The population actually in Latin America is younger, which means that this is another big trend, which leads people to adopt Nubank. So anyways, lots to love. Just the beginning for a bank like Nubank, in my view. It's an emerging market and explosive growth is coming ahead. And my very, very last stock here before I talk about Bitcoin is Airbnb. Airbnb are trying to disrupt hotel. That's what they're trying to do, but it's much more than hotel, right? Hotel is old news. We all know Airbnb is trying to disrupt hotel. That's old news. No, in my view, Airbnb is trying to disrupt mom and pop rentals and anything that has to do with the world of a rental or the world of I need a space, I don't have a space, or the world of I'm a property owner and I have too much space. Meeting the people who need space. I'm a vacationer and I need space. I'm an international student and I need space and I don't have all of the paperwork yet. I'm whoever and I need space. It's matching people that have space to people that need space, and above this match, like all platforms, it puts a layer of trust. Just like Uber put a layer of trust on getting into people that don't have cars and people that have cars, right? You couldn't do that in the past because you didn't have any trust. So we used to say never ever get into a car with a stranger, and now it's so weird because we just get it on our phones and we click a button and we get into a car with a stranger. Why are we confident doing that today? Because there's a trust over it, right? There's a major trust system. Hotels were popular because they were the only way to maximize trust in a non-digital era. And hotels kind of worked, right? There were issues if you're traveling more than two people, but hotels kind of worked. Think about mom and pop rentals. Trust never worked in mom and pop rentals because you have to rely on the justice system. You have to rely on the laws of your country if the renter stops paying, right? So trust never ever worked. With Airbnb, you have a major layer of trust, a la Uber, just a little bit like Uber. So this layer of trust is their million dollar insurance if there is an issue, and that is perhaps the less important part of that trust. The more important part of that trust is the rating system on Airbnb, right? This is something that was pioneered by eBay. In the early days of internet, people didn't trust buying online, so eBay invented this rating system where you end up trusting someone through a rating system. Imagine the value of a rating system, of a dual rating system on an Airbnb. It's like people, Gen Z, who are more and more on Airbnb and get all of these ratings, and they may get a rating for 3 months, they may get a rating for 3 days. As you build your Airbnb rating, you're going to show up with a 99.95 score when you try to, say, rent a single family home. Well, that landlord is much more likely to trust you, not only because they have insurance, and that's one factor, but a bigger factor is the trust, the social proof, the fact that you've had, 100 people that have reviewed you. That's gold right there. And so Airbnb created this layer of trust between people who have spaces to let and people who want to lease those spaces. That's why I believe this story is much bigger than that of a disruption of hotels. Hotels are going to be disrupted, of course, but it goes beyond that. I mean, and when I say hotels are going to be disrupted, I think this is an important point. Like when you say anything's going to be disrupted, it's tough to ever mean 99% is going to be disrupted. What I always mean is 95% is going to be disrupted, because if you look at gas cars, right? Gas cars disrupted horses. But we still have horses here and there, except they're a novelty. They're considered this exotic mode of transportation. I remember going to a hotel lost in the middle of West Texas not too long ago, and they actually had a stable for horses, as for people who wanted to come in a horse. Now there was no horse there, but the hotel could still accommodate a horse. That's very rare. It's going to be bespoke experiences. So do I mean that the high-end boutique hotel, the very bespoke experience, is going to be disrupted by Airbnb? Absolutely not. I don't mean that. But do I mean that your very average hotel, your Hampton Inn, whatever, is going to be disrupted by an Airbnb? Absolutely. There is no doubt in my mind. There is no doubt in my mind, because it is much better. So just a little point about technological adoption, right? You're always going to have the edge that's going to remain. The big question is those 90 to 95% of use cases, what are they going to do? Right, and that's the idea behind my belief on Airbnb. Let me conclude this video. This is getting a little bit of a long video. I am sorry. I am feeling a little bit sick today, or under the weather, which is why I'm going slow. The last asset in this video is Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is actually down today a little bit, which is interesting. So the whole idea of Bitcoin, why is Bitcoin my bond alternative? Because Bitcoin is the only asset that is not correlated to the US dollar. Bitcoin is not correlated to the US dollar. There's no for example, gold could be construed as correlated with the US dollar, because if gold were to go up, then you would have gold mining stocks who would invest US dollars in order to start up new mines, and they would mine new mines, and then you would have more gold, and then the price of gold in US dollars would go down. So gold has tiny, but has a little bit of a correlation with the US dollar, like all commodities do. Bitcoin doesn't have any correlation with the US dollar, because unlike a commodity, it doesn't matter if you have $1 trillion, if you have $20 billion worth of electricity mining it, or $1 trillion worth of electricity mining it. The issuance schedule is always gonna be the same with Bitcoin. Like the supply, we know exactly how many Bitcoins are gonna exist until 2041. 2140. We know exactly that there will be no more than ever 21 million Bitcoin, and we know exactly at what date how many Bitcoins will exist, and the competition between the miners and how much they mine. That's all between them, and they all compete for the same block and the same Bitcoin. Every 10 minutes, 6.25 Bitcoins are being issued, and that's all they compete for. Those 6 Bitcoins every 10 minutes. And every 4 years, it gets halved. So every 10 minutes, every 4 years, there's 3 Bitcoins. In 2024, there will be only 3-ish Bitcoins being issued and not 6 anymore. And because of that, it doesn't matter how much money you invest in mining, you can't get more Bitcoin out. It's a pre-scheduled issuance. So it is an asset where the demand for that asset does not increase the supply of that asset, which is absolutely stunning. It's not a derivative. It is not a derivative. It is its own thing, and you don't have counterparty risk. But Bitcoin eliminates counterparty risk at a whole new level, if that makes any sense. Because if you buy a bond of any kind, you have a counterparty risk, right? So you may buy a corporate bond. The company goes bankrupt. Well, here goes your bond. What's going to happen to your bond? Well, you're going to be higher up in the capital structure, but you may not get all of your principal back when the company goes bankrupt. So that's counterparty risk right there. Now the U.S. dollar treasuries, right? The treasuries, they're considered risk-free by traditional finance. But you saw the Fitch downgrade. The Fitch downgrade is very concerning because they're entirely risk-free. But every 2 years, we get into the debt ceiling debate, where lawmakers often end up on the brink of reaching that debt ceiling. And of course, the U.S. defaults. The U.S. defaults if they can't raise the debt ceiling. And how do we know that all of the political shenanigans, the political negotiations that are happening every 2 years, can we be 100% certain that every 2 years they'll be able to raise the debt limit at the last minute? No, I mean, that's what Fitch is saying. Fitch is saying, at some point we may be in a gridlock where they really don't agree, as both parties hate each other more and more, where they really don't agree in the U.S. defaults, and that's your counterparty risk right here. So there is counterparty risk in bonds. You have no counterparty risk in Bitcoin. So that's the power of that. And I'm not even talking about inflation, right? Inflation is a major feature of Bitcoin, because you can't have any more Bitcoin. And the dollars, of course, this channel being named Beat the Denominators, we know that dollars are plentiful and they are being issued at a rate, in my view, of 15% more per year. Even though right now we may be in a bit of a slowdown. It will reaccelerate when the US needs to fund its deficit. And that's very obvious in my view, but that's not advice, that's just me. So, this concludes my video. This was not investment advice, this is just entertainment. I hope you were entertained. Appreciate your likes, appreciate your subscribe. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.